President Trump says he will make a decision on whether to join Israel's strikes on Iran within the next 2 weeks. The White House press secretary said Donald Trump thought there was a substantial chance of negotiations with Tehran over ending the conflict. It came at the end of another day of missile exchanges between Israel and Iran. Almost 300 people were injured in Israel today, including more than 70 when a hospital was hit. Iran has warned the United States not to get involved in the conflict, saying it would result in hell for the whole region. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, is in Washington. Sarah.
After all the fevered speculation that Donald Trump could make a decision to strike Iran at any moment, he has lowered the temperature considerably today by saying that he will make a decision within the next 2 weeks. There are no talks currently scheduled with Iran, not that we know of, but he clearly wants one last chance to try to do a deal in which Iran would agree to stop all uranium enrichment in return for not being attacked by some of America's largest and most destructive weapons. Donald Trump's instinct is pretty much always to try and force other countries to bully them into doing what he wants without having to resort to military action.
Deep inside the White House, in the subterranean Situation Room, there are daily meetings discussing a possible US strike on Iran. Around the world, from Israel and Iran to the UK and the US, there is an intense focus on what decision President Trump will make.
I have a message directly from the President, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks." That's a quote directly from the President for all of you.
Mr. Trump says he will not make a final decision until the very last second.
You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
There are media reports that Mr. Trump has already approved a plan of attack, but not yet decided to implement it. He's pushed back on that, saying on social media, "The Wall Street Journal has no idea what my thoughts are concerning Iran." Israel has vowed retribution for this latest Iranian attack on a hospital in Beersheba. The Prime Minister is urging Donald Trump to join the battle.
President Trump will do what's best for America. I trust his judgment. He's a tremendous friend, a tremendous world leader, a tremendous friend of Israel and the Jewish people. And we will do what we have to do, and we are doing it. We are committed to destroying the nuclear threat, the threat of a nuclear annihilation against Israel. We're able to do it. And we, of course, will make our own determination. But I have to say that the partnership with the United States, the partnership with President Trump, with whom I speak to almost every day, is incredible.
No one in Iran is speaking directly with President Trump, not that we know of, but he's still holding out hope that the regime may agree to give up their nuclear program without American military action. Their public statements, though, are defiant.
We think that this war is not American war, but if they would like to get into this war, President Trump will be remembered forever for a war that it was not his war, but dragged in. And this will be a quagmire, and this will be a hell for the whole region.
The likely focus of an American attack is the deeply buried nuclear site of Fordo, south of Tehran. Getting to this facility is near impossible with existing weapons in Israel's current arsenal. It's deep inside the mountain. If the US attacks, they would have to use the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. It is the only aircraft capable of effectively deploying the GBU-57, the massive ordnance penetrator that weighs in at 30,000 pounds. The biggest risk would be to US forces stationed in the region. If an Iranian reprisal were to kill an American, a wider conflict could quickly ensue, one with global consequences.
The principle is that we need to de-escalate this. There's a real risk of escalation here that will impact the region, possibly beyond the region, into Gaza, and obviously it's already having an impact on the economy. So I've been absolutely clear, we need to de-escalate this.
By giving himself 2 weeks to reach a decision, President Trump has created some breathing room, a little time to give diplomacy a chance. He's hoping that the threat of US airstrikes might be enough to force Iran to comply with his demands and prevent America getting dragged into the kind of foreign war he pledged to avoid. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Washington.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Ione Wells, who is in Jerusalem. All quiet so far tonight over Israel. But what happens now? Do they give diplomacy a chance? Do these missile attacks stop?
Well, I think the short answer is no, and there's a couple of factors that I think contribute to that. Firstly, we have to look at why Israel struck Iran in the first place and their justification for that. They said that Iran's nuclear program was days away from potentially producing a nuclear bomb, something that Iran denies, and that this was an existential threat to Israel. They came up with a long list of targets that they wanted to eliminate, including Iran's entire nuclear program, but also its ballistic missile threat. Now, it would seem odd for the Israeli government to suddenly decide to stop this targeting, which is clearly stated, is its aim. Now, secondly, Israel, and especially Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has long been sceptical of Iran's diplomacy. It is one of the reasons that people think that they may have decided to strike Iran before what was supposed to be the latest round of US-Iran negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. So that is another factor, I think, that suggests this isn't going to go away. Now, thirdly, you have to look at what the rhetoric has been from both Israel's government, but also President Donald Trump. Prime Minister Netanyahu said just this evening that he wasn't looking for a green light from the US before those initial strikes on Iran. And Donald Trump has said as well that he's told Netanyahu to carry on. I don't think any of that looks anything like the kind of de-escalation that we've heard other world leaders calling for.
Ione Wells, thank you. Well, our political editor, Chris Mason, is with me now. De-escalation, that's what Sir Keir Starmer has been calling for. David Lammy is in Washington. He's been there today. Is there any sign that they've been listening, Donald Trump been listening to Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, certainly from those I speak to in government, they see this 2-week window as welcome because it's not, at least immediately, the alternative, which is an escalation. The Prime Minister's watchword, as you say, has been the opposite, de-escalation. So David Lammy, as you say, has been in Washington. He met Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State. He also met Steve Witkoff, the US Special Envoy to the Middle East. And I detect coming out of that a sense in Washington that emphatically they would prefer a diplomatic solution, but they're quite pessimistic about the likelihood of getting to that and that the military action remains on the table. The Foreign Secretary is now flying to Geneva in Switzerland. There's talks there with Iran's foreign minister alongside Germany and France. And then back here at Westminster, there are historical parallels. They're imperfect, but they're nonetheless being made, including from figures in government, with Iraq of 2 decades ago, a Middle Eastern country, talk of development of nuclear weapons, threatened US aggression, and a big question, what should the UK do? And in particular, in this instance, the military base of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, a potential starting point for those US bombers heading to Iran if they press ahead with these strikes. Now, the Liberal Democrats today have explicitly been drawing that parallel with 20 years ago, saying that legal advice should be published. The Conservatives are saying the UK should be much more bold in being willing to support an ally in Israel. So for now, the talking continues, but at some point, the Prime Minister's phone could ring and it could be Donald Trump saying, are you with us or not? And that is a big decision.
Chris Mason, thank you. Well, one unlikely mediator in all this, at least that's what he has offered to do, is Russia's President Putin. Russia has a strategic partnership with Iran and he is urging the United States not to intervene. Our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg, reports.
It's an economic forum. But in St. Petersburg this week, Vladimir Putin isn't just talking business. He's thinking geopolitics because of the dramatic events in the Middle East. Here, the Kremlin leader's first public reaction to the escalating violence. An offer to mediate. Russia, he says, has sent signals to Israel, Iran and America. From Russian diplomats, condemnation of Israeli attacks on Iran's nuclear infrastructure.
Everybody is talking about political situation, regime change, but nobody is focused on the most important and dangerous thing, nuclear issue.
Russia and Iran are close allies. Earlier this year, they signed a strategic partnership agreement. But the deal doesn't oblige Moscow to come to Tehran's defence. And it hasn't stopped the Kremlin maintaining good relations too with Israel.
Russia has obvious good ways to talk to different parties of the conflict. But once again, let's see how the situation develops. I think all of us want stability in the Middle East. All of us want some kind of resolution.
No sign of America, though, accepting Russia's offer to mediate. Some here actually see positives for Russia from escalation in the Middle East. They predict that higher global oil prices will boost the economy and that the world's attention will be diverted away from Russia's war in Ukraine. But the idea of direct US military intervention in Iran and the prospect of regime change there, that is causing alarm in the Kremlin. While calling for de-escalation in the Middle East, Russia continues to wage war on its neighbour, on Ukraine.
We never bomb civilians. We just targeting military targets, objects and infrastructure in Ukraine.
There was a mass Russian attack on Kiev a couple of days ago at drones and missiles, and civilians were killed.
Not civilians.
Russia wants to portray itself as peacemaker. That's a hard sell. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, St. Petersburg.